I'm Tanya Smith with Get Noticed with Video and Stream Like a Boss TV. What we're going to be doing tonight is a special live guest interview. I've been doing these pre-recorded interviews to talk with guests who are persistent streamers, people who are using live video to really promote their business and their brand. And we've been doing pre-recorded as live, but tonight I have a very special friend and guest, Stephen A. Hart, that I'm going to introduce you to in just a few minutes. Before I do that, I'm going to share my quick intro video and give you a chance to go and get your favorite drink, whether it's water, coffee, wine, whatever it is. Get that in your hand, get your notepad in your pen, and be ready to meet Stephen A. Hart. All right, I'll see you in just a few seconds. All right, everybody, you have to meet my incredible friend, Stephen A. Hart, with the biggest smile ever. Stephen, welcome.
You caught me in the background, like jamming to your music.
I thought it was the perfect picture. I thought it was just, look, everything about you, Stephen, I will tell you, I have admired for years. I think you, your beautiful family, your story, everything about you, nothing but admiration. So I'm really super excited that you're here with me live so that we can engage with the audience.
Yes, I'm so glad to be here.
And I'll tell a little story, especially for those who are in my community in a second, about how we made this one live, because I have been doing pre-recorded, but I need to share because there's always a learning opportunity. Virginia, it's wonderful to see you, ma'am. Good to see you. If you are here, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are, feel free to say hello. We are here engaging with you live in these comments. So I'm super excited to have, this is just going to be a little bit of a twist, and we're going to do some impromptu stuff probably, Stephen. Let me do this first. That's the way it's gonna be tonight, dude, because it's been a crazy couple of weeks. So what I want to do first is introduce you, because I need to do this formally and make sure that people know your background because it's stellar. First of all, Stephen A. Hart, and we're going to add that A when you're looking for him online to differentiate, because there are lots and lots of Stephens, but there's nobody like Stephen A. Hart. He is on a mission to help guide heart-centered leaders and entrepreneurs through a proven process to identify their life's purpose, vision, and so that they can design a brand and a future worth living and leaving. So here's the thing that you need to know about Stephen. He is the founder of Isles Media LLC. He's the host of the top-rated Trailblazers.fm podcast and the creator of Brand in Demand. He has featured over 250 successful Black entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals on his podcast and his live shows, reaching his Blazer Nation, which I love that, Blazer Nation community in 150 countries. There's so much I could go on, but I want to definitely tell you this. He's a proud husband to his wife, Kristen, of 13 years. And together they are proud parents of what he calls two crumb snatchers, an 11-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. So definitely had to share that little tidbit about you. But also people can find you. Is it StephenAHart.com?
Yes.
Awesome. I'll be popping that up a little later, but here's what I have to do. I need to ask you, what is not in the bio, Stephen? Talk a little bit about what people need to know that's not in the bio.
Not in the bio is that I'm gainfully employed. As a Jamaican, I have probably 17 jobs, right? But I am gainfully employed. In addition to the things you mentioned, I am the director of new media content at the SANS Institute, which is the world's largest cybersecurity and certification firm on the globe, and enjoy that role. I actually just stepped into a promotion, which we'll talk about a bit more about in our convo. So
Yes, yes, yes. Look, Virginia said, a man of many hats.
yes,
And then we
Virginia.
also have a hello from Philly. Awesome, awesome.
Marla. Hi,
Good to
Marla.
see you. So, look, the thing about you having many hats, this is one thing that I absolutely adore is that you and I both have kind of run a little bit on the same track when it comes to that because we both are juggling. And so we definitely have to talk a little bit about the juggle, right? Because not everyone, I think, does things at the level of excellence that you do and still is able to thrive in all of these different spaces. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about that. In fact, Teresa said, wow. And then I also saw, and he is doing an excellent job. So someone from LinkedIn, I'm sure that these are your people, your circle
My Blazer
is not
Nation community is
yeah,
repping on LinkedIn.
Blazer Nation in the house. So look, I want to talk a little bit about, there's so many things I want to talk about. Let me share this first. So, Stephen, not only is he incredible as a business professional, but he is also an incredible human being because we literally had pre recorded this video. I'm only sharing this for purposes of my community over in the Stream Bosses camp. So, the Stream Like a Boss folks, I want you to know that we pre recorded this. And then somehow it probably was user error, but I missed the video pulling it, right? Because we recorded this several weeks ago in order to pre record it or share it as a pre recorded video through live.
Mhm.
And I'm sharing that to say, after all the many videos that I've done, and I've done a lot, a whole lot. This is one of those moments where you think, oh my God, my systems failed me. I want to say this because no matter what you do, nothing is ever going to be perfect.
Mhm.
You always need a plan B. And Stephen stepped right into the plan B. And so thank you for that. I just had to share that. Sometimes
Absolutely.
mistakes will happen.
And as I shared with you earlier, that's happened to me too on the podcast many times over, and more times than I'd care for it to have happened. And
Yeah.
so, with Restream and StreamYard, you have kind of a limited window. I think StreamYard just updated their 14-day window to a permanent window of time that it stays there, but
Oh,
you're capped on the storage that you're allowed. So,
okay.
whichever platform you choose to live stream, be mindful of that. And if you make the
Yes.
mistake, you're human.
You are human. We're
Yes,
real
we
people right
are.
here. So let's talk about live streaming. And I know podcasting, honestly, is that's where I think you were when we first met, is you were
Yeah.
starting to podcast. I need to share this hello because it's somebody else from Blazer Nation. 13 jobs and one at the flower shop. I love it. I love it. And then someone else, Teresa saying Team StreamYard. All
Yes.
right. So she's giving hearts to StreamYard.
I love
Talk a
it.
little bit about how you started out. So I know it was the podcast, but tell me a
Yeah.
little bit more about how things morphed into you using more video.
Yeah. So I'll get real. The truth is, it's not a pretty transition. The truth is, in December 2019, my dad suffered a stroke, and it was the first thing. So I've been podcasting for more than 5.5 years now. February coming will make 6 years I've been podcasting. And so I went 205 episodes of the podcast, never taking a break. Every Monday morning, 5 a.m. Eastern, I'd put an episode up. January 6th of 2020, I get my dad home from the hospital, spent the Christmas in a hospital room. I get home, my editor reaches out and says, I've missed several interviews I'd scheduled over the Christmas break. He says, hey, what are we doing? And I'm like, we're doing nothing because I'm balling on
Right.
my dad's living room floor in Jamaica. and I was empty. And so I took the first half of 2020, and then 2020 happened, right? Kids end up home from school, wife gets furloughed, wife gets injured herself, like all the things that could go wrong did. And I
Yes.
literally went through a season of mental strife, like, in therapy, all the things. I resumed a podcast. One of my dear friends said, "Hey, I'd like you to do a series in the fall with Procter and Gamble." Said, "Sure." So we did a season. I finally came back to the pod. What I thought was going to be a month became 8. We resumed a podcast in September, and I had enough in the tank to kind of get us to December. My dad comes to spend, so he gets better. We finally get him from Jamaica to the States in October of last year. And he comes to me for Christmas last year, ends up having a second stroke here in January. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do the post work of the podcasting.
Yeah.
Post work has gotten easier with tech these days, but you and I know podcasting from the days where you'd spend 5-6 hours editing one hour of an episode. And so my story isn't pretty, but it's real, right? I fought last year with identity crisis that came from it. I needed to stop to deal with Stephen in that season. But at the same time, for 4+ years, the podcast was my life in many ways. It was my identity. It's a big part of me. And so I wanted to resume that. I didn't want to go into another 8-month break. I wanted to publish, but I said, how could I create content? How could I have these conversations, but not have the headache of the post work? And I'd been watching live streams at the time, and I said, you know what? I'm going to figure this thing out. And I entered the year, literally on the other side of my webcam right now is a pretty big room. I'm in the basement of my house. Half of this room is my office. The other half I turned into a studio apartment for my dad. And so while he's here recovering from his second stroke, I would cut the lights off in the morning, sit here, have my key lights hit me as they are right now, and I'd be going live. And I still do that to this day. And I literally went through I remember saying this to you before, but I went through a mindset where I had to embrace, this new mantra, right? I was going to embrace being bad until it got good. Right.
Yes.
And that's what happened. That's how it got started.
Oh my goodness. Look, I love your story for so many reasons. One, it's real. I don't always hear, we don't always hear, and I know the people that are watching this don't always hear the reality behind all the things. It just looks polished, it looks nice, it's beautiful, right? But nobody knows all the things that are happening in the background. I think when you and I were interviewing before, your dad was in the background kind of hanging out and just listening in, right? But it's reality. These are things that still happen. Just because you showcase or you're seeing other people showcase themselves as though things are perfect, we're all human beings.
Yes.
And this is the number one reason why I wanted to do this interview series, Stephen, because of you, because of your story, and because of what people need to know, which is you can still do live video. You can still engage with other people and create a space for your message in spite of the things that are going on, the adversities that you may be facing in your life, because you fought through that and you realized that someone needed to hear what you had to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's coming from the podcasting days. I realized that, you know what? There's a small group of people who are waiting for me to get off my behind, step up to this mic, and ask some difficult questions that are going to help them to impact their own world in a way that they couldn't before until I made that episode happen. So this wall behind me is what my daughter affectionately calls my Hall of Fame, my podcasters Hall of Fame, right? There's some of my fun interviews. There are people up here like Janice Brandt Howroyd, who, you know, is the first woman to build and grow $1 billion business, right? But there are people on here like Craig DeBarbo, who just left corporate America and said, hey, you know what? I love barbering, and I'm going to pursue this as a career, right? Yeah. So success has many meanings, and to different people, it hits home, right? Different episodes connect with people in a different way. And for me, it's knowing that God planted a seed in me. God planted an idea in me to birth this platform, and it's been able to impact so many lives. And so, you know, whenever I feel that tug that says, hey, you know, you need to move forward. And I don't know if we spoke about this before, but I really have a belief that we all have to get clear.
Yes.
On where our destination is, right? Where are we trying to go? And for me, in this season, and all that I talked to you about before, if I didn't know where my destination was, I could have gotten caught up just saying, you know what, let's call it quits. It was a good ride for 4+ years. You know, on to the next.
I'm out.
I'm out. But I had clarity. I had goals that I wrote down, you know, on paper. And I had before me. So when I was in the coach last summer, feeling depressed and dealing with the depression and, you know, the bucket of ice cream and the Netflix, I could pause and look at my goals and say, hey, you know, is this still what is important to you?
Right.
When I got clear that the answer was still yes, it was like, all right, you know, this pathway ain't going to get us there. So what detour can we take that still gets us to the destination?
Yes. I need to share with you some of these comments that are coming in, because people are reflecting on what you're saying and they're agreeing with this. They're agreeing with this. I love it. Letting go of the part of ego that holds one back is part of the journey. Yes. We need grace for ourselves. So glad you embraced it. It's so much value. Thank you, Marla. Yeah, Stephen, I think people need to know. People need to hear some of the things that are not all the pretty blingy things. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that and sharing that. So when you switched over to video, what were some of the things, because I heard you say a couple of things in terms of moving from the podcast to the video space. One was that you recognized that there was an easier path. Instead of you having to produce and edit everything, you could literally go live. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go live too, is because I was tired and done with all the perfection needs. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to bear it. We're just going to do it authentically, and we're just going to get on video and go. So tell me how that transition went for you, though. What did you have to think through? What are some of the changes in workflow, changes in equipment? What are some of the things that had to change as you moved from podcasting over to video?
Yeah. So none of this nice background back here was there, right? It was a bootleg webcam. There wasn't any lighting. I was staring in this ring light that was giving me headaches. You know, it was what it was at the beginning. It was bad. And, you know, having to, what a lot of people don't realize is when you are the producer and the host. So right now, right, I'm talking. I just have to talk. But you have to manage comments. You have to you know, if you're switching screens, like you have all of these things to manage. And what I would say to anyone looking at live stream, what I had to first do is say, look, I do not have to turn on all the bells and whistles that are available to me. I just need to hit record, and I just need to pause. And if I'm going to get wound up in the comments thread, because that can happen too, right? You know, when you just get started and you realize that whatever you say can't be taken back, and your heart starts racing because you're worried and you get anxious that you're going to say something that, you know, the world is not going to forgive you for, which is not the case, really. But you're going to get in your own head.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, I had to work through that. There are times where I go live and I literally would just make sure I'm live, make sure I'm unmuted, because I've started too many lives on mute.
I've done that. All
Talking
of
for a
it.
whole minute, and then I see the comments light up, or somebody sends me a WhatsApp like, "You're on mute."
Mm-hmm. Been there.
So I'll make sure I'm good. And I kid you not, there are days where anxiety is on me, and I'll just turn it on, and I'll flip a tab, and I'll look at something else. And I know everybody's seeing me, but I don't need to see them. I just need to get
Mm-hmm.
the idea or what God placed on my heart out, and then I can come back and I can deal with the comments, and I can close up my stream.
That's
So
right.
part of it is a big thing for me was sometimes you turn on a video and you're just blabbing on, and that serves no one. With a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, you have a lot more structure, and no one's watching you. And then you have all the post edits, so you can fix all your ums and ahs and pauses and all that. You can't do
Mm-hmm.
that in a live. It's raw. So you work through some of that. You work through elements of what you want to appear on video, how you want to handle certain things, and you
Mm-hmm.
embrace what happens. Listen, I did this live at work today, and there are things that happen in a live that you just cannot plan for, account
Yeah.
for. I was producing a live. I wasn't actually in the live, but one of my guys is interviewing somebody externally, a pretty high-ranking lady, and she's in the middle of talking, and a fly pitches on her nose, and
Oh
she
no.
swats it, and then the fly comes back, and and then before you know it, she's doing the karate chops all through this video, and eventually, I mean, she was so polished, and at that point, she starts laughing. Right? They have a good laugh about it, and she makes a good joke that she wasn't going to Mike Pence it, uh,
Oh, no. That was
and
my
just
first thought.
let it sit there, right? But they had a good laugh, and then they could be like, hey, at least this is live, because we're going with it. Uh,
That's right.
but those things happen in life, and I had to work through all of those things. The mornings where you get up and you can't get your video to turn on. I've literally done a live where it's audio only, and I just shared something on my screen. I've gone through all of it. So, but you know what? Again, like I said earlier, you just commit. Just like I committed to podcasting, I committed to live streaming, and I said, you know what? It's going to be bad till it gets good. And it's gotten better and better over time. You add more efficiency, you add more systems, more processes. You figure out your workflow, you figure out what works for you, what doesn't, and you
Mm-hmm.
make it your own. And then after a while, it gets much easier. And then before you know it, people are turning to you for advice.
Which they are.
Yeah.
They are turning to you for advice. Because look, it's hard to believe that you haven't been doing this for years and years. You've been doing podcasting for a while, but you have such a polished presence. And I truly believe, Stephen, that it is, and the same goes for both of us. It's because we stay committed, like you said, to being bad until it got good, right? You still put yourself out there.
Yeah.
So kudos to you on that. If you were brand new and you were starting out right now, what are some of the things that you would tell a newbie, a person who is brand new to putting themselves on camera? Because they may be watching, they're listening, they're looking, and they're saying, "Hey, I want to try it," and they're giving me some hope. But what are some of the first things that you would tell that new person to video to do or to think about? What should they
So,
work on?
so the big thing, the big one thing, you don't hit record until you frame the content. So what do I mean by that? You want to get very clear on what you want out of an episode, out of a piece of content, whether that's live stream, podcasting, a blog post. You need to get clear on what is that key takeaway, what is that insight, what is the value you want your listener to come away with. So a lot of times now, I will sit and I will think of, well, I would like to do a conversation around a particular topic. And I get clear on kind of what are the keywords. Because if you're doing live stream, you're probably serving YouTube, and you need to make sure you're dialed in to the visual, the thumbnails on YouTube are everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the keywords, the words that you pepper into that YouTube video are so important. So you need to think about, what's the topic? What's that keyword? Is that going to drive, is that in alignment with who you're serving? Is that going to drive traffic? Is that going to pull your audience in? And then understand what's the value you want to relay through that conversation, right? What's that takeaway? So if I know I'm going to interview, Eric Thomas. Eric Thomas is a big motivational guy, right? I mean, full of inspiration and motivation. So you can hit those chords, but what do you want him to bring out in that conversation? Right. You need to think about that, so that as every conversation I have, I kind of have a underlying framework for the episode, but I know where we're going to tee up. I understand exactly where the peak point of that episode is going to be, whether it's going to happen in 20 minutes or an hour. I don't really care, right? But I know where I want to get to. And so by the time I hit record, I don't need to have any notes up in front of me. You probably will, but you don't have to have every last thing framed out. Mm-hmm. You just have to have a mental idea of where that conversation is going, so that you can enjoy the conversation, right? And that's something else too. That's probably another gem, is that sometimes, as a newbie, you get so caught up. You wrote down 8 or 10 questions that you want to ask your guest, and you must get out your 8 to 10 questions. Yeah. And listen, I've gotten to the point where I woke up and I was in the 3rd question, and I'm like, ooh, this right here. I can't go past this, right? And I'll think like how my listeners think. Yeah. And the response to that, I need a why did that happen? Mm-hmm. And then they respond, and as much as I feel like we can keep digging a hole, the interview can stop. We can toss all the other questions in the trash and live right there in that conversation, because that is where the magic happens. So just get clear on what you want out of the episode, right? Yes. But you know what? You could have framed that thing and something else is there. Don't stay on the surface. Dig deep and go for it.
And you're talking specifically, it sounds like, about interviewing other people, which is definitely an art in itself. Yeah. It is something, like you said, you have to maneuver, because you can have that set of questions. And I know I've done it. And you're so focused, like, wait, I was supposed to ask this question next, but he's already answered that. Where do I go now? You have to be, just like with anything else, be a good listener, be caring, be compassionate. Think about what it is your audience wants to know. So I love that you're sharing this. I need to go through some of the comments here, because I am loving the comments coming through. Excellent direction. But this one is one I really wanted you to see. Thank you for sharing. I needed to hear this.
Yes, I'm City.
Somebody needed to hear what you had to say, Stephen. Yes, you both know your purpose. It comes across pretty powerfully. Yeah, but just like Stephen said, Teresa, we both have been in spots where we weren't clear initially. There was a point, at least I know in my career, where I really didn't have a clue. And we experimented until we got it right. Right? And got clear. So I do love that it comes through now. Stephen, your live streams have become a source of inspiration, insights, and knowledge.
Ralston's one of my diehards, man. Ralston shows up every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. and I love it. Appreciate you, brother.
Awesome. Awesome. So talk to me about that schedule of yours. How did you decide how many times a week you were going to go live?
I don't know what motivated me to initially start this way. I just thought, I wanted to do more than once a week. I
Yeah.
wanted to experiment doing multiple times a week. And it's been rough even this year with it. I knew that Fridays
Yeah.
was going to be my traditional Trailblazer style interview. And more recently, so when we started off, Monday and Wednesday, I was just doing solos. But I've
Hmm.
always had this vibe, this energy pulling me towards doing a panel style conversation on Wednesdays and inviting more people to have conversation. One, there is a strategic mindset behind having a panel style interview, right? If you're
Yeah.
having a guest style platform, every new guest you bring, you leverage their network, their reach to bring more eyes to the content you're creating. So a panel invites multiples. Your leverage just increases. But
Yes.
I've always wanted to have that kind of panel style conversation. And so I'm experimenting with that right now and doing what I call a Wednesday takeover and having a good partner who is actually interviewing or bringing people to the table. In Sean Dove, one of my diehards, friends and partners and past sponsor of the platform. And so in this time, we're experimenting and see what that looks like. But I keep Mondays as a solo for myself to be able to share brand ideas, inspiration, motivation, whatever I'm feeling called and led to share, and keep it short. So my Mondays are 15 minutes, Wednesdays can be a full hour, and Fridays could be somewhere in that 30 to 45-minute pocket. So I'm also trying different times in terms of the length of a stream.
I want people to listen to what Stephen just said. I want you to hear a couple of things because we've talked about this, especially in our community, Stephen, and I'm sure you have too. There's a couple of things he said. He said, I'm trying out, I'm experimenting. He used words that I think sometimes we don't hear. When we hear about marketing, we hear about formulas and if you do it exactly this way, but each one of us as creators, we have to be cognizant that there is no one path, that we have options and that we can experiment and figure out what works for us in our realistic schedule.
Mhm.
One, two, we need to look at what our audience wants, what they're asking for. And three, we need to think about our creative capacity. So he's saying, hey, I'm mixing it up. I'm going to have short videos. I'm going to have longer videos. I'm going to have some with multiple people, some with just me. This is the this is the way. This is an opportunity for you to really see that there are many paths to using video. So everything that you're saying, Stephen, is just like I could have just pulled it out of a magic hat and said, "This is in my wish list," and
Listen, it ain't easy
you're hitting
too.
it.
It ain't easy because one of the present challenges I'm dealing with right now is it worked at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year when the kids were in the house doing homeschooling. But
Yes.
now they're back in school, and I'm like, 8 o'clock is tough if I had a drop. Right. So now I'm playing with, do I do 8:30 on Fridays just so I don't have, the headache? And I'm playing with times right now. So, I am choosing to be consistent and committed to it. But things will happen, right? And you
Yeah.
have to be able to be a little bit flexible while at the same time, being respectful of the audience. People like Ralston and Annette and Stacy and several people who show up consistently, at
Hmm.
8 a.m. I have to be respectful. If they're committing to be there at 8 o'clock, I'm committing to show up. And there are days where I don't feel like showing up on a live, right? I got sleep lines running through this ball head and my eyes are all puffy. And I'm like, if they're showing up, I'll get a ping like, hey, you going live today? I'm
Like,
not
what's
feeling,
it
no, you
about?
going live today, you know, and friends will hold me accountable and we go
Yes.
live. And oftentimes when I have that feeling, when you have that feeling and you're like, I don't feel it,
Mhm.
I always say to myself, let's just see what happens. let's just see what happens today. Let's hit record and see what happens. And I tell you, some of the most amazing content I've created have come by way of me just hitting record on those days.
Yes. 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 I love it. I love it. Here's a question. A question from a LinkedIn user. So, for beginners doing non interview streams, do you recommend writing full scripts for the content or stick with outlines to guide and remind? What's your take on that one?
That's a great question. So, for some people, it works better in one of these two scenarios. What I would just say though is I can write a full script, and by way of just training myself to read a script, you would not ever know that I scripted the whole thing because there's energy. It's you cannot tell I'm reading. And there are parts where I'll go off script, but I also write my scripts in a way where there's a sort of double readership path. What do I mean by that? I have big blocked headlines at certain areas, and then I have some meat and potatoes. If I have to go off, I can just move on from that block wherever I feel, the need to move on and hit the next headline.
Yeah.
So, I'll read through, if you're going to do the full script, I'll read through that full script 2-3 times. And I'm comfortable with kind of the heavy, the points that I want to drive home. It's also good to just bullet those things instead of writing it out in a paragraph style format. Yeah. I prefer now to outline versus writing a full script. But when I started, believe me, I could show you my Evernote right now where all my Trailblazer episodes. I would write out whenever I was doing a solo. I'd write out the whole thing. I could literally copy the whole thing into a transcript when I was done. And that was just the way I operated. So you can do it, but what you don't want is for your listener to feel like it was so scripted. Right. You want to add energy, and you want to add, even if it's a podcast, if it's non-video, if it's non-interview, people still hear your smile. People still feel your energy. I can come in and say, hi, you're listening to Stephen Hart, and you're listening to Trailblazers.fm. Right. And immediately the energy is low and dead.
That's right.
Or you're listening to Stephen Hart. Thank you so much for coming on to Trailblazers.fm today. And you're immediately fired up. If you're listening to the podcast, you're like, yo, this dude drank too much coffee this morning.
He's on monster drinks. Caffeine.
And so you want to energize your audience, your listeners, no matter how you feel, fire yourself up and give them your energy, your best energy.
And you know what I hear you saying in all of this? Because I'll tell you, I do things a little differently, and I'll share my quick, short take on it. But I hear you coming out from the podcaster mindset. Let me tell you why. Because voice is really everything when it comes to being a podcaster, for sure.
Yes.
But it does translate, like you're saying, even when it comes to video, the voice matters.
Gestures.
Your demeanor and the way that the way that you're showcasing who you are and who you're being at the time, in the moment, it does matter. It's one of the reasons why I always talk to people about making sure you give yourself a little time to breathe. Because I used to jump from my 9 to 5, run up the stairs, hurry up and get on camera, and I'd be darn near out of breath trying to talk to people, and it did not come off well. It came off like it was, and your thoughts were all jumbled and distracted and just crazy. So give yourself space to prepare, just like Stephen's saying. And I'm big for beginners, since the question is referring to beginners. I agree that scripting out can definitely be a plus as long as you pay attention to what Stephen said. Do not read from the script. Don't look like you're reading from the script. If you're brand new to this, probably your best bet is to start out with doing an outline or bulleted points. And what I teach often is to just use some sticky notes, like put sticky note 1, sticky note 2, and sticky note 3 around your ring light if you have a ring light, for example. but don't give yourself the overwhelm of having to juggle all the many things, including your full blown script. If you feel like you're not going to speak comfortably, because we don't want you coming off like you're a robot on your
And something I
videos.
still do to this day is that whether I'm guest or I'm host, I almost always have my screen split in half. One for the video that I'm in, and other for the bulleted items that I want to make sure I cover during my
Yeah.
conversation. And so, my eyes aren't drifting everywhere. I can
Yes.
still pay attention, but I'm also on track with where we want to be. Be respectful of time, whether it's an interview style or non-interview style. You
Hmm.
still want to drive that value home. You still want to give your listener that takeaway. The episode needs to be as long as the episode needs to be. As long as you're adding value, they'll stay.
Yeah.
Ask Ralston, right? Ralston can comment on this right now. Ralston's been with me for 15-minute episodes. Ralston's been with me for hour and 15-minute episodes. And sometimes those hour and 15-minute episodes end up, and somebody sends me a DM and says, why the heck did you stop that conversation? Because that thing was juicy. You should have kept going. And I'm like, it's an hour and 15 minutes.
This needs to be 2 hours, 2 hours.
Right? But when
Yeah.
it's good, no one wants you to stop.
Yeah. I
So
love it.
don't necessarily time yourself. If you want to live within a half hour, live within a half hour. Right? But I used to fight for that when I just started. I'd be like, I want every episode 30 minutes. Well, I can have what I've realized with Trailblazers. I could have the same 8 to 10 questions that I interview 10 people. 2 or 3 of them are going to be done in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Majority are going to take 30 to 45 minutes. And then you have your outliers that take a O, and probably could keep going if you don't push them.
And look, we've even gone over time for most of my guest interviews.
I
But
know.
it's because it's value. It's
Yeah.
because I feel like everything that you're sharing, that we're talking about tonight, is something that's going to be relevant to someone who is staying on because they feel like, hey, this is exactly what I needed to hear in this moment.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, of course, for all your different ways that you do things and the approach that you use, Stephen. I just look, okay, let me ask you this, and then we'll get ready to wrap because I
All
want to
right.
respect your time. If there was one piece of equipment or one thing that you've discovered in the process of your journey for video that you just couldn't live without, whether it's software or equipment, whatever it is, but what's one thing that you couldn't live without?
One.
No, you got to pick one.
I can't say one. I got to give you a couple. So I'm a StreamYard junkie. I'm big time hashtag the yard, right? Big time believer in StreamYard. But beyond that, man, I love my Logitech. I bought a Logitech Brio. I was looking at all these fancy DSLR cameras for streaming, and I just wasn't ready to spend $1,000 on a camera.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Logitech Brio. Has software, so I can pan the video left or right. I can zoom in, and the quality of the video. If I switch back to my MacBook camera, you'd be like, "What's Apple up to?"
What happened?
It's so polished. And then I got key lights that attach to my desk. I got some key lights from Elgato. They're a little bit more expensive, but I got rid of the ring lights. It's over here somewhere now. And now I'm not staring in lights anymore, but I have all this nice light, on each side of my desk, brightening me up. So you don't have to spend all that money right away. Like I said before, I started with what I had and then slowly migrated, but figure out if you're a Restream or a StreamYard person. Both are amazing platforms.
Yes.
And slowly just improve on the quality of your video, your lighting, and other bells and whistles. All the other background stuff, I do everything in Canva for free. So you can do a lot with a little to get
You
going with
sure
live stream.
can. You sure can. You sure can. And I love that you talked about the Rio because I've had some people that have asked about it. And to me, I'm looking at your camera quality and it is excellent. I'm using a DSLR camera right now, but mainly because I also use it for soccer videos.
Yeah.
And when I was, my daughter was going through the recruiting process and we were trying to get her into college and on a college team, I needed to take really good videos, right?
Hmm.
So I just had one and I thought, you know what? I'm going to start using a DSLR for
And
video.
I'm
But
dying to get one.
I,
I
but
want to get one. I just wasn't
but
there yet.
yours
Yeah, I
is
wasn't there.
beautiful. It still looks good.
Yeah.
The
And
Brio is awesome.
a lot of the cameras, whether you're using a Canon or a Sony, you can do the nice blur effect and the bokeh in the background. But
Teresa.
Teresa's like,
Okay,
give me that
ma'am.
link.
We'll make sure we get you that link. I have your DM, so I'll send you a link for the Brio.
But yeah, no, it's a great camera. I love it, and it has software that I'm able to manage my lights and my camera
Yeah,
directly from my desktop.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Stephen,
me.
as always, like you're my brother. So just know
Absolutely.
anything you need from me, I'm there. I know you've been there for me as well. Look, Ralston left this comment I have to share. You're always adding value. So people recognize that. People know this about you. You're going to have more fans, I'm pretty sure, from this broadcast, from my community that are going to start following Stephen A. Hart. Look, let me go ahead and put your website in here so that people can find you. Stephen A. Hart. I'm going to capitalize ahart.com, right?
Yeah.
And
And I'm most
this,
active. I'm real active on Twitter, on the gram, and on LinkedIn. And you can find me at Stephen A. Hart on Twitter and on Instagram. So definitely connect, wherever you are, connect with me. Let me know what you appreciated most. And let's stay in
please
touch.
do. Do follow him everywhere. Look, I'm putting up your, let's see, socials too. So I'm going to put them both up so that people know how to get in
There
touch
we
with him.
go.
Because what I want to do is I want to create a space for people to learn from as many amazing, incredible, and real, authentic content creators as they can.
Mhm.
Not just me, but others who I trust. And I trust you immensely, Stephen, to give people the real deal and good advice. So thank you so much for being a part of my show. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is there one last thing that you would like to share with our audience just to let them know about video or just about branding or business in general? Any piece of advice or nugget that you want to share?
Listen, be your authentic self. Don't be afraid to share. Don't think that certain platforms are for certain types of content only. I'm a brand strategist and a marketer, but if you want to learn more about my personal journey raising the crumb snatchers, you follow me on Instagram because that's where I share a good bit about them. But it doesn't mean that I can't share info on Kristen and the crumb snatchers on LinkedIn. 3 weeks ago, I did, and surprisingly, the thing went viral. And on Labor Day weekend, I shared a post about me and my wife having. I moved from Florida to Maryland this past Labor Day 14 years ago. And on a whim, I was dating a girl for a year long distance. Now we're married and we have kids and all of that. But the thing exploded on LinkedIn of all platforms, and I shared it elsewhere. But it's like approaching 100,000 views.
Mm,
So when the nugget I'll leave is take away this mindset that your content belongs in only certain places, right? If you're being your authentic self, you show up the same everywhere you are, right? And you
okay.
let the world know more about who you are and allow them to connect to you. When I share about my family, it allows somebody to connect to me, whether they have kids and married or not. They can respect kind of my position and my place, They can
Mhm.
embrace that I'm a dad or trying to be the best dad ever. Can embrace, and appreciate those things. And by
That's
way
right.
of that, then they'll anchor to what I'm trying to talk about when I'm talking work. So that's what it means to me to kind of show up and be your authentic self. And I'm going to encourage everyone to do the same.
Well, I'm just thankful for you being you and for
Thank you, my
showing up,
friend.
showing up and being authentically you
Part
wherever
two
you
was
are.
better.
I know. I was telling him, I'm like, but it was my favorite interview. And I was having a moment, like a breakdown moment, when I reached out a couple of nights ago and said, can you please just like really show up live? And you showed up. And this really, yeah, anytime we get a chance to talk, I know it's going to be something that's going to be of help to someone. And
Yeah,
that's like, I'm sitting here trying not to tear up for real right now, but thank you for being a part of
I
my community
loved
and
it.
for letting me be a part of yours.
Absolutely. We will do it again soon.
All right, deal.
Have
Okay, everybody, have a good night.
a good night, guys.